Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today. On today's topic of discussion, we're going to talk about the 13-year head start, or otherwise choices, because ultimately the choices we make today as parents determine the choices that they have tomorrow. So let's get started. But before we do, I just wanted to ask you a few questions. So, who wants their child to have more opportunities than they had? What about more access, more exposure, more options for their children? Who in here would rather not figure out a $300,000 bill within 6 months' notice? And here's the truth. We cannot control the choices our children make, but we absolutely can control the choices available to them. So on today's agenda, we're going to look at 6 things. The gift that you already have today, given, and I must stress this part, that your children are in ECD. Then we're going to look at the real price tag of what global education currently costs, as well as looking at the two types of parents, the one that sleeps well at night and the one that's tossing and turning. On number 4, we're going to look at the risks that nobody talks about. And on number 5, we're going to look at the structure that entirely changes everything. And last but not least, we're going to look at the moment that makes it all worth it. When your children graduate, you're stress-free, you're not worried, you know they've gotten into the university of their choice, they're excited, you're excited, and life goes on. So looking at the gift that you already have. So given that your children are in ECD, then one particular gift that you have, which is incredibly powerful, is time. And when it comes to educational planning, time is not just helpful, timing is everything. If your children are in primary, you still have time, but the window is swiftly closing. Because once your kids are now in high school, you're kind of running behind the ball a little bit. You're already a little bit late, especially once they hit 15. Then at that point, you are frantic, you are panicking, and you're worried about how you're going to be able to send them to university. So the 13-year head start is when your children are in ECD, or your child is 5 or 4 years old, that gives you 13 to 14 years of growth, 13 to 14 years of compounding in the markets where your money works for you, 13 to 14 years of lower monthly contributions that you can save towards sending your children to university. Also, this allows you to continue living your lifestyle as you were living it without any drastic lifestyle changes because you were planning and you were putting money aside every single month. Now, the alternative is waiting, winging it, and starting when your children are 15. And this gives you 3 to 4 years of panic. 3 to 4 years where compounding works against you because you didn't give it enough time. 3 to 4 years of greater monthly contributions so that you can send your children to university. And almost no flexibility. Actually, you might have to drastically change your lifestyle and cut out things that you enjoy doing or otherwise your children love, just so that you can meet the bill that's coming up for tuition as well as living expenses when you're sending your children abroad. So what does it really cost you to send your children to university abroad? Now, before we actually begin, I just want to play a quick game. If your child walked up to you today and said, Mom, Dad, I would like to study in Australia or in Canada doing a psychology degree, what cost you per year? Okay, let's look at the figures. So I'm going to use Australia, the University of Curtin in Perth, as well as the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada. Looking at tuition today, in Australia, it's going to cost you $25,000 per year to be able to educate your child doing psychology or maybe a business degree. But it is of note that these are median figures. So if your child decides to do something like medicine or otherwise engineering, those figures are going to be slightly higher than what they are right now. So in Australia, for a 4-year degree, tuition alone, you're looking at a budget of $100,000. And in the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada, you're looking at $128 for a 4-year degree. But this is not accounting for inflation. So in 13 to 14 years' time, that same $100,000 for your Australian degree is going to cost you 173K. And for Canada, it's going to cost you 222,000. This is also, I think, a good point to mention that if your children are to study in South Africa, those figures are much less. If your children are to study somewhere like the US, those figures are much higher. In the UK, somewhat in between. So looking at living expenses for the 4 years, you need to budget roughly about 20,000 US dollars per year, making it 80,000 US dollars for a 4-year degree. And then adjusted for inflation, their numbers come up to about 121,000 US dollars for a 4-year degree for both Australia and Canada. The costs are pretty similar when it comes to living expenses, but obviously this can be chopped and changed if you have relatives that they're going to live with, etc., etc. But ultimately, let's just look at the grand totals. So for Australia, you're looking at roughly at 294,000, while for Canada, you're looking at 341,000. So now the choice is really up to you as to where your children want to go, but at least now you have the realistic figures as to what it's going to cost you. So this becomes your goal, and ultimately there's sort of different ways that we can do this so that you can ultimately just benefit from not worrying about the expenses of sending your children to school. There's a silent thief of time, which I'm pretty sure you noticed in our calculations, and that's inflation. So we calculate about 4% annual tuition inflation because there's 3% inflation on the US dollar plus an additional 1% increase in tuition on a yearly basis. And then for living costs, we calculated with about a 3% cost of inflation. And we plan for that 13 years in advance because inflation doesn't really care about your plans, but a plan can absolutely care about inflation. So, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to start early because the earlier you start, the cheaper the choices become. So, there are two types of parents. And before we talk about which one you are, I'm just going to describe both of those parents. The first parents is the hoper. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm going to get paid more in the coming years. And they pretty much run on faith and not on structure. And they rely on future income, they hope the economy cooperates. They plan to figure it out later. Then we've got the second parent, parent B, the structurer. They plan early and they're very intentional about creating an education fund for their child. So they create a hard currency education fund. They use time and compounding to work for them, not against them. And they protect against policy and currency shifts and whatever local risks that there might be that might affect their ability to send their children to university. So ask yourself, which one are you? Because if you're sitting there right now and you're thinking, well, my child is 4 years old, I've got time, I will figure it out. You're already sort of on the parent A, you are the hoper. But if you're someone who doesn't want to hope, who doesn't want to scramble to raise up finances, then be the structurer that plans early and is intentional about their child's education. So, which parent sleeps better? I think the answer is quite obvious. The goal today is to make sure that you are and you stay parent B. That way you can sleep better at night, knowing that your children's education fund is accounted and sorted for. So there's also risks that we never talk about. First of all, international education is priced in USD, which means that any currency volatility in your local economy could affect your ability to send your child to university abroad. There's also policy risk. You may be a business owner thinking, well, my business is booming right now. We are on top of the world and nothing can stop this train until there's one policy shift that entirely flips the game upside down on top of your head overnight. We've seen it happen before, and it's bound to happen again. What are you doing to protect against such risks? Then there's a 3-year trap. A lot of parents think, well, my child is 4, As an advisor, I've met quite a lot of people actually when, on the first initial call that I give them, they're like, yeah, well, my children are 4 and 5. I've got time. I think I'm not really in the space to plan for education. And I always have to remind them that this is the perfect time to actually get planning for an education fund for your children. Because once we have 3 years left before they finish high school or they're 15 and you have 3 to 4 years before they need to go to university, unfortunately, we are too late. It's for the same reason that I don't take clients on that want to do 5-year policies, is we just don't have enough time in the markets for the capital that you put in to compound and also to do it at such a rate that if something like a COVID happens in between that 5 or 4 years, you still have a good value left in your portfolio and you need to give it time to recover. So, the fourth risk that nobody talks about, relying on future income. Relying on future income is hope and faith. It's not based on facts. It's a lot of hoping, and it's thinking. It's wishful thinking, to put it in the least, because who is to say you're going to earn more when time goes by? What if you stay where you are? What if nothing increases? What if nothing changes? Because income isn't a plan, structure is a plan. And the biggest risk is not market volatility, it's having no plan at all. So let's talk about the structure that changes everything and my role in how I help families build education funds that actually work. First of all, we have access to globally diversified portfolios with assets and asset classes offshore, which help you earn in hard currency, which help you save in hard currency while we house the capital in stable international jurisdictions. Additionally, we build the strategy of saving. It becomes a disciplined long-term strategy of putting money aside every single month, which is systematic, consistent, and helps you compound on a monthly, yearly basis. Now, the last point is very important. When you structure your educational plan offshore, you're reducing local volatility exposure. So whatever happens locally does not affect your child's future. And I help parents plan for education funds to send their children abroad without having to stress about it. The worst thing that I always find for parents is, you love your children, you want to give them the best options, you want to give them that exposure, you want them to do better than you did and succeed in the life that they have to live. But in order to do that, you're going to have to think ahead. And as parents, sometimes we are overwhelmed, I think, with just the day-to-days of life, meeting the current school fees bill, attending the soccer game, attending the hockey game, attending the tennis match, paying for extra tennis lessons and that sort of thing. But if we just stop for a moment and envision in 2040, when our child graduates, that feeling that we're going to have once they finished high school and we're worried and we're either worried about, oh my God, how am I going to fit this bill that is coming for university? Or you are the structured parent who is at graduation smiling and enjoying because they know that they're ready and prepared. So let's talk a little bit about Carrick Wealth and how long we've been in the game and how exactly we help parents do this. So we were founded in 2014 by Craig Featherby with a simple but powerful mission, which was to help African families build, grow, and protect their wealth. We've been in the market for 12 years, and the Zimbabwean office opened its doors shortly afterwards in 2015, meaning this is our 11th year in the market servicing African families. We're now regulated across 6 countries in Africa. In Zimbabwe, we're regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And our one mission is really to build, grow, and protect your family's wealth over the long term. We want to ensure that you can retire with security, and we want to ensure that we've protected your wealth across generations, as well as ensuring your kids have the financial freedom to pursue the opportunities that they deserve. And typically how we tend to do business is we don't believe there's a one size all fits. There's a one size all fit for finance. So what this means is if you feel interested, if you want to know more about planning your precise education plan for your child, book a free meeting with me today for consultative purposes, and we can begin mapping out your personal strategy, especially if you have an idea where your children want to go. If you don't know where your children want to go, we can also have a broader discussion around what life has been like in Canada, what life is like in Australia, as I myself studied in Canada and then I studied in Amsterdam. So I do have a bit of exposure and a bit of information and insight as to what it's actually like being on the ground in these places. And the first meeting is free, so you absolutely lose nothing. So is the second meeting. Ultimately, we are not going to charge you if you come from this particular website series. If you come from this particular webinar series, there'll be no charge to you. So I urge you to book a meeting today so that we can actually map out your personal strategy. Now, the moment that makes it all worth it. It's 2040. You're at your child's high school leavers. You're proud, you're relieved, you're grateful, and you're confident. You're confident because you have a structure in place and you're not worried about how you're going to meet this huge educational bill. You're confident because you planned ahead. You're confident because finances are not the thing that are limiting your child. Your child has the world as their oyster, so to speak, because you were a structured parent. You planned ahead and you put money aside while there was time, and that money grew for you and actually helped you save what you're paying out of pocket. That is the beauty of structure. Ladies and gentlemen, for today, I really just wanted to have sort of a conversation with you. Call it an eye-opener, where you just start to think a little bit more about these things. And then I think picking it up on a one-to-one basis makes the most sense. So when it comes to our children, we cannot choose their passions. We cannot choose their path, but we can choose whether finances limit them. Choices are created long before they're needed. You don't need to start big. You just need to start intentionally. So before you leave today, ask yourself one question. Which parent will you be? Parent A, hoping things work out when the time comes, or parent B, planning early, structuring intentionally, and creating choices? The choices that they have tomorrow are shaped by the choices you make today. At Carrick, our rule is simple. We're going to turn your uncertainty into structure. We're going to plan calmly, strategically, and intentionally, so that one day your future self looks back and says, that was the moment everything changed. And your child walks into their future with choices. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you're ready to start, let's build your plan and let's pick it up from there.